Don't you hate it when wholesalers give you deals that are for buy and hold investors? To me, that's code. As soon as I see they're looking for a buy and hold investor, that seems to be code that the property's overpriced. My name is Chatto, and I'm a landlord for over 25 years and a full-time real estate investor for over 10 years. And I wanted to share some of my thoughts on pricing property, figuring out how much you can pay for a property so that it makes sense and that you're going to make money as a long-term rental. So without further ado, let's chat with Chatto. So basically, what I want to get at is in real estate, especially as a landlord, you make money when you buy. When buying the property, buying it at the right price, that's where the money is made. It's not when you sell the property, even though sometimes that's when you cash in, but that's a whole nother story. At the end of the day, you need to buy right. And I see these guys and they post these deals and I look at them, and buy and hold investor, when they say we're looking for a buy and hold investor, it's always code for, hey, this thing is too expensive, but maybe because a buy and hold investor will have it for the next 20 years, it'll work out for them. I mean, I'm a buy and hold investor. If that's the case, I could just buy anything on the market and buy it retail. The property still needs to make sense. So I'm going to go over with you a quick and easy way to kind of get your head around whether or not the property that you're buying is a deal. So the rule of thumb, the first thing that I look at is what is going to be my all-in price. When I say my all-in price, I'm looking at, okay, how much is the property going to cost me, plus closing costs, right, plus renovation. That's the first thing I look at. Like, what am I going to be all in to get this property from where it is to being a performing rental? So that's the first thing I'm going to look at, is how much is that going to cost me? And again, how are you going to figure out how much the renovation is? Well, that varies, and you're going to learn with experience. But it's always going to cost you more than you think it's going to cost you. In the beginning, you might be able to have a contractor come in and get some quotes for you and get some numbers to kind of give you an idea. Add 20% to it and maybe use that as your budget. But I need to look at, when I'm analyzing a property, how much it's going to cost me to purchase, how much it's going to cost me to renovate. And I need to get that number. Why is that number so important? Because I need to create equity. Again, I make money when I purchase, so I need to create equity. So what I mean by that is, once I get this property fixed up, once I get this property performing, this property is now an asset that I can go to a bank and get a loan to refinance out and get all my money back. So that loan usually requires 25% equity. So that means that I need to create at least 25% equity in my deal in order for it to make sense. So let's throw out some quick and easy numbers. Let's say a property is worth $200,000 all fixed up. Cool. So that means if I want to create 25% equity in that property, I can't, after purchasing it and renovations, I can't be at more than $150,000, right? So that leaves $50,000, which is 25% of $200,000 in the property. Cool. So that's the first thing I look at, right? It needs to make sense from that standpoint. It needs to make sense from, I have equity left over. When I refinance the property, I'm going to be able to get the money back out. Whether or not it's my money or it's private money or it's hard money, the money that I go into the deal with needs to be able to be gotten back out of the deal, right? So that way I can use that money to buy the next deal, and so on and so forth. So that being said, that's the first thing. But the second thing, which is just as important, is I need to determine whether or not that property is going to cash flow, right? Because I can't buy, how many properties can I buy if I'm losing money every month on each property? So I need to make sure the property cash flows. So in order to do that, so that's the first thing I look at. So now I say, okay, that property that we talked about, fictitious property at $200,000 after repair value and it for $150,000. So what I do is I take that $150,000 and I use 10%. And $150,000 at 10% is $15,000 a year. And just doing numbers on the top of my head, $15,000 a year in interest is what I would pay on $150,000 at 10%. So I divide that interest by 12 months in a year, 15,000 divided by 12 is 1,250. So now I'm in this property for 1,000. It's going to cost me to own this property, not including taxes, not including insurance, just to service the debt on this property. Interest only is $1,250 a month, right? That's number one. Then I say, okay, what are my taxes? What are my and what's my insurance? And depending on what kind of property it is, if it's a multifamily, I need to factor in other things that because a tenant in a multifamily, I'm going to have to pay the water. I might have to pay other utilities. I might have some other expenses like lawn care and maintenance. So right now, let's just keep it to a single family house. Assuming that you're going to rent it out and the tenants are going to pay for the electricity, they're going to pay for the water, the sewer, the lawn care, the snow removal. That's all on them as a single family tenant. So I find out, okay, so it's going to cost me $15,000 per year for the interest on the money. Okay, cool. Then it's going to cost me, let's say, $4,000 a year for taxes. Then it's going to cost me, let's say, $1,200 a year for insurance, right? So it's taxes, insurance. So those are the major expenses that I have. So I'm only so good at math. So we got $15,000 a year plus for interest, $4,000 a year for taxes, and again, whatever the numbers are in your area, I'm just making a fictitious property, and $1,200 for insurance. That adds up to $20,200 per year just for those expenses. So now I'm going to say, okay, well, what does this property rent for? So if this property rents for, I don't know, $1,500 a month, right? I do the math, 1,500 times 12 would be 18,000. I'm losing $2,000 a year before any maintenance, before any other expenses, before management, before anything. I'm losing money right out the gate. So if this property is only going to rent for $1,500 a month, it does not make sense as a rental when I'm in it for $150,000. Even though I've created $50,000 in equity, I still need some sort of cash flow. So that's what I look at. I'm like, okay, so how do I get that property to cash flow? So now, this is where a lot of people these days say, oh, make it a short-term rental, Airbnb. Yeah, leave it as a long-term rental. It needs to make sense as a long-term rental. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck at some point. Just don't do that. Like I said, the expenses on this particular property are $20,200 per year for interest, taxes, and insurance. Okay, cool. So now if it's rented for $2,000 a month, that would be $24,000 a year. So it's about $3,000 a year in profit, so to speak, right? I get there's other expenses, but that's $3,000 over what your principal, interest, tax, and insurance would be. Actually, interest, tax, and insurance, because you're not including principal here. But you're going to be making on that property about $3,000 a year, right? So it's not too much, right? You divide that by 12, maybe $200 a month. It's not enough, right? Because that $200 a month is going to get eaten up with a few maintenance and repair issues, and with some management, especially if you need to hire out management, right? So that being said, right, in order to kind of keep it simple, you need to figure out what your monthly number is. Now, keep in mind, you're all in this property for $150,000. The goal is that this property is going to be completely renovated at that price, right? You've purchased something that's a junker. It's got new heat, got new roof, new kitchens, new bath. Like it's just like a renovation, like a fix and flip, right? It's the same thing. You have a property that's completely done at the end, right? So your CapEx expenditures should have been taken care of in that 150, and your maintenance should be pretty low because you just did everything to the property. So your maintenance should be pretty low. Yeah, things happen. You need to have reserves, but keep that in mind. So now, kind of when you're thinking through it, right, what's that number for you? Now, in the beginning, right, the less properties you have, the higher you want that number to be. And that's really because if you have one property and it's vacant, you're getting stuck for your $2,000 a month or whatever it is expense on that property if it's vacant, right? If you have one property. If you have 10 properties, you still have the income from the other 9. And if they're all making a couple $100, that's going to cover the one in the meantime, right? So you may have a higher tolerance for cash flow risk as you grow, just because things become exponential. There's what's the word I'm looking for? When you have when you do stuff in bulk, you're able to save money, right? You're able to get better deals from your contractors, better deals from your local vendors because you're giving them a lot of business. Whereas if you're a one-off person, then you just have one property, it's going to be a little bit harder to do that. You're not going to have people jump as much when you need to get something done, and they're not going to worry too much about giving you the best price because you're not giving them a lot of business anyway. So that being said, you need to figure out what that number is that's comfortable for you. I know a lot of these calculators, they get involved with, hey, let's take out for vacancy, and let's take out for management, and let's take out for CapEx repairs, and let's take out for just all this stuff. It keeps going on and on. And by time you do that, you will never find a property that cash flows. Yet these properties will cash flow. You're going to be able to buy properties. I've purchased properties myself that we purchased a 4-unit in the end of 2017, and we're at 2025, right? So it's been 5, 6, 7, almost 8 years, 7, 8 years. We've had this property, and the same tenants have been there. They've been paying rent. There's not been one turnover. Yeah, some things came up here and there. Some things needed to get addressed, but there hasn't been one turnover in that property. So that property is doing great. That property is doing awesome. Right now, if you transpose that to another property where you've gone through 2 or 3 tenants in the same time span, that's going to eat up a lot of the profit. And there's no amount of including vacancy and including vacancy and management. There's no amount of expenses you can add in that's going to have that make sense. I mean, sometimes it happens. Overall, though, right, the growth of the cash flow will help to offset those things, right? That's why, especially getting started, you need to have reserves, right? You need to be able to weather the storm if you get a bad tenant, right? You need to weather the storm if there's just damage to the property. You need to be able to weather the storm when all these things happen. So to boil it all down, right, to keep it simple, right? And I know I said a lot and I tried to explain it, and it'd be great if I had some kind of magic board that would show you the numbers on the screen, but I'm not quite that advanced. But the moral of the story is, if you purchase the property for if you're all in on the property for no more than 75% of what it's going to be worth fixed up, that's the starting point. So that's number one. No more than 75%. And when I say 75%, I mean you're not just buying a property for so if the property has a lot of deferred maintenance and a lot of work that needs to get done, you have to take that out of the 75%. You need to be able to buy the property and get it to where it needs to be and be all in for 75% of the full value. So that's number one. If you can do that, that's the first thing you need to do. But the second thing you need to do is you need to be able to cash flow at 10% interest only, interest, taxes, and insurance. So you take interest, taxes, and insurance, right? On one side, that's the expenses. You take the rent on the other. You take the rent, you subtract those 3 expenses, and you get a number, right? If that number is negative, you're beat. If that number's even, you're probably going to lose money, right? And you need to figure out for you where the sweet spot is. On a lower end property, it might be $300 a month that you need to be at, and you may have some trouble if things arise. But if you get closer to $500 a month per unit, which is that income and those expenses, you're probably going to do pretty well. You're probably going to be able to do pretty well. And then, see, the beauty of it is once you refinance your debt, so there's 2 things that can happen. So once you refinance your debt, number one, you plan on 75%, right? That's what a bank is usually going to give you, 75%. So if you did the renovation well and you did it quickly, right, and you were able to do it less than your budgeted amount, right? When you do that refinance, so if you've only spent $140,000 between purchase and renovation because you did a real good job on the renovation and you were able to just get it done quickly and efficiently and save some money, right? You're in it for $140,000, but you can refinance it for $150,000. So you're putting $10,000 tax-free into your pocket when you do your refinance. So not only are you paying back the $140,000 that you're into the property, you're taking $10,000 and putting it in your pocket. And the other thing is you're paying 10% interest on that money let's say you borrowed private money or something. But if you're paying, like, say, 10% interest on that property and it cash flows, right? Once you get it down to 6-7% interest, now you're going to cash flow even more. Some of that gets eaten up with principal, but principal is just kind of an automatic savings account as well. You will still cash flow. So that to me is like the two big things you need to look at is number one, 75% of what it's going to be worth. Number two, at 10%, interest, taxes, and insurance. Will it cash flow? As your portfolio builds, maybe $300 a month would be where you need to be. Or as your portfolio, as you're getting started, you might be closer to 500 or 600 or not, if not more. It's whatever your comfort level is. If you have a lot of reserves, you might be willing to take that hit a little bit on cash flow in order to get a deal, right? Because you're able to weather that storm. Because again, overall, your property will go up in value. You will get depreciation. You'll be able to get write-offs. There's so many different ways to make money with rentals that it makes so much sense to even just get a couple into your portfolio just as part of your retirement plan. But that being said, hopefully I kept it pretty simple for you, and hopefully you enjoyed watching this video. We're 16 minutes in, so if you're made it this far, I appreciate it. Like and subscribe because the algorithm, blah, blah, blah. And, if you have any thoughts or opinions, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let's have a conversation. And again, thank you for watching this episode of Chat with Chatto.